80 years, the degree of cinematicity of the southern capital of Kazakhstan has not been questioned. That's how much time has passed since the evacuation of the entire industry of the most important art to Almaty. Consequently, the success of the best Soviet films of the war period was partly due to the atmosphere and surroundings of the city. In turn, Kazakhstan cinema at the time of its establishment inherited the concentrated experience of cinema makers who moved to Almaty. Even the main pedestrian alley then, now Kabanbay batyr, was the focus of the intellectual elite. Based on the notion about the beauty, it was called Broadway. At the crossroads of Broadway and Tolebaev, the story of Moreau, the protagonist of the iconic and, without exaggeration, a legendary film The Needle, comes to an end. Well, in principle, in 30 years, nothing has changed here except the monument and the tiles. Rashid Nugmanov is a graduate of the Polytechnic University with a degree in architecture and a graduate of GIK, the workshop of Sergei Solovyov. Author and director of the Kazakh blog Batyr, which is unsurpassed in popularity. I received my first degree in architecture. I majored in architecture right after school. As you know, the first education lays the foundation for the rest of your life, a professional look at everything that you would do. You can't escape its effect on you. It stays in your subcortex. Later, I myself noticed that when I was making films, at certain moment, it was as if I were constructing them as an architect. Because cinema is a dramatic work consisting of blocks that develop over time. As if anticipating the imperishable status of the needle, Rashid Musayevich carefully screened out signs of a specific time from the film. And today, numerous fans of Viktor Tsoi's work, who played the leading role and was pronounced the actor of 1988, according to a survey of the Soviet Screen newspaper, did not stumble over the old posters and signs. The film crew of the masterpiece certainly made an extraordinary effort to complete this task. We strive to create a universal city that you could look at 30 years later, as we are looking at it now, and to see what constitutes its essence, and not something superficial, like kiosks, letters, and so on, to convey its volume, its space, its life, its breath in a way. That is why we chose such points in order to convey this particular view of the city, a bit of its atmosphere. In a way, on some subconscious level, we wanted to immerse the viewer into such an unusual city. A look through time helped to precisely select the location for retribution over the negative character performed by another popular rock musician, Pyotr Mamonov. A successful drug dealer, in accordance with the volume of his income, spent the last minutes of his life in the most respectable bath complex of the country. The construction of the building of Arasan cost the budget of the Kazakh SSR an inconceivable 17 million rubles, although its luxuriousness didn't really correspond to the main purpose of the complex. For comparison, the average monthly salary of a specialist with higher education in 1977, when the erection of a hyper-large-scale facility began, was 120 rubles, 100,000th part of the cost of the construction. So let's look at the Arasan building, for example. As a child, I remember when I walked in the park through Kunaev Street, this building always fascinated me from afar. Azizhan Psayev, he graduated from Kazakh Leading Academy of Architecture and Civil Engineering with a graduate degree in 2009. He is the author of Buildings and Fountains in Almaty. It was so modest, but somehow it seemed to me as a huge palace, with its domes and the ascetic facade like a kind of retro-futurism. While its shape, these curves, arches remind me of a spaceship. David Kaminsky, urban architect, student of Satpayev University, researcher of urban architecture and popularizer of the Soviet modernism. It is futurism, but oriental, ornamental. Well, it's modest enough, I would say. Well, from outside it looks ascetic, but inside I think it's richer. Let's see what's inside. The relevance of the construction was determined statistically. According to the Soviet standards, 3 washing places were required per 1,000 residents. A little more than 1.5 were present. But the scale and pathos in solving this problem is part of the eternal race with neighboring Tashkent, where they already opened their outstanding bath complex in 1977. Partly the lack played in favor of Arasan. There was time to accumulate world experience in organizing public baths and famous steam rooms. The team who authored Arasan traveled across the entire socialist part of the planet, from the famous sand dunes in Moscow to the world-famous Geller in Budapest. Only Mamonov's character is missing here. The authors and architects of this building complex approached its design very thoroughly. They studied all the literature available at the time. They even went to the library of the Academy of Sciences. They read, studied, and in the end, yes, it turned out to be unique. At the time, there wasn't any standards, and they had to construct a unique, amazing building based on their experience. And what was the result? The result was amazing. Among the various prototypes and previous constructions, the medieval bathhouse preserved in Kazakhstan's Turkestan became dominant in the heritage sense. In particular, the use of natural light shining through holes in the domes and ceiling. However, in interior, there are a huge number of noticeable references and innovations never seen before. Pay attention to the details. Semicircular steps, the texture of walls and ceilings, some incomprehensible thing on the ceiling. It's like something experimental. It resembles a waterfall, like drops of water tied together and falling down. There is such an effect, but it turned out very conceptual, I would say. Spacious, huge lobby, the effect of retrofuturism in large spaces. These round wells remind me of the Alvar Aalto Library in Viborg. I agree. With such deliberate pathos of the structure, design solutions here are purely functional. Even the huge domes are the hallmark of Arasan, and it's not at all about the East or religion. They facilitate the drainage of steam from the ceiling. From the 21st century, it is a particular pleasure to evaluate the aesthetic standards of the 20th century. Well, now it will be very hard to find most of the materials used in the decoration of various interiors of the bath giant. You see what a riot of colors here. Look at the floor. There is a white marble. On the walls, there is a textured extravaganza. The materials used are all natural. It's great. Look how the ceiling is veneered. The main pattern above is geometric, just like in the main hall of the Academy of Sciences. And in the middle, in the niche, there is a huge chandelier. Simple aluminium and glass begin to play and turn into a fairy tale. These hemispheres like drops of moisture, this ornament inside of a cast glass. But I would also like to add, look, there is a whole ensemble. There is a chandelier, there is a chandelier at the main entrance. They are part of an integral large composition. By the way, it looks very authentic. And it was preserved almost in pristine condition. And note the color scheme. Everything is in harmony with the walls and with the floors. This entire significant establishment with an area of more than 21,500 square meters requires special care and is in a state of permanent restoration. The staff of 300 specialists can serve the needs of more than 500 customers. Apparently, they are satisfied. The electronic guide for tourist attractions gives the bath 4.5 stars and actively attracts lovers to take a steam bath from all over the planet.
Was perfect because this place really fulfills our expectations.
I've been to a Turkish bath before, and I've lived in Japan, and I've been to some Japanese baths before, but I've never been to one this big before with so many different things, with a restaurant and a bar and cosmetic stuff and swimming pool and and
It's big.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Much more than expected.
Yeah.
The delight is justified. It's no coincidence that to this day, Arasan is the largest bath and recreation complex in the countries of the former USSR. A great place to shoot an episode for one of the best films of the Union at the very end of its existence, and pass the baton to new independent film, including the film Far by Karpykov. Far was filmed by my fellow classmate. Together we were studying at Solovyov's workshop, and we worked shoulder to shoulder for several years at the gig film set. And of course, we learned some tricks, directorial point of views from each other, the common aesthetics of a certain style. The representative of creative youth was later called the new wave of Kazakh cinema. Architecture helped Albay Karpykov to distinguish his film from the general mass. The Three Bogatyrs complex, where the protagonist and his unexpected bride live, is known for its uniqueness even today, let alone the 90s, when the shooting of the film began. When the complex appeared in its time, it personified something new, a completely new aesthetics, because before that a colonial style prevailed in Almaty, and suddenly a 12-floor building appears. With such a perfect appearance, very technological for its time, it was perceived in a certain sense as an avant-garde. Let's try to significantly expand this idea. The concept of communism demanded standard construction. It wasn't necessarily comfortable, but to the extent it should have been the same for everyone. At the same time, few people thought that the southern parts of the country require more shade, and as for Almaty specifically, it required special standards for earthquake resistance. The latter aspect was usually solved by low-rise buildings. Until the end of the 60s, the maximum level of engineering thought was 4-story buildings. That's why 12-floor building was perceived as a real skyscraper. The threat of destruction from the natural element should have been leveled by beams connecting 3 buildings to each other. At the time of filming, we found the building at the initial stage of restoration. Most importantly, it shouldn't prevent our experts from discerning the very essence of this extraordinary structure. I remember the initial image of this building from the book Soviet Kazakhstan from 1971. Winter, a blue sky, a white snow, and a white building. My impression was that this building was floating in the air. I remember when I first saw it, I got scared. Just some kind of vertical ghetto, mini mahala or favela. But initially it was not like that. Initially its style was modernism. Look, there is a terrace, inclined parapet walls. This was all for the first time in Almaty. The skepticism of modernism fans is explained quite simply. It was planned to leave the overlapping between the buildings proudly open, but the human factor adapted and transformed those voids with all sorts of belongings in spite of the aesthetic component. Colleagues found the architectural density of the quarter, continued by neighboring houses, a bit strange. We come to the end of the terrace, and what do we see? The balcony of the neighboring house. Passers-by got to the nerves so much that the balcony was closed with metal. It is closed now. In Soviet times, people passed on greetings to each other. As if in the steppe there was a terrible shortage of space for the development of residential quarters. This attitude does not fit well with the apparent uniqueness of the Three Bogatyrs complex. Parts of the architectural plan were gradually surrendered to the interests of the owners of the commercial space, of the stylobate. For example, it was planned that terraces on 3 levels would be in operation. Now, access to the one on the top is blocked even for residents of the house. We must remember that this is a large urban ensemble which was gradually enriched. Well, it has enriched indeed, but now all the skillful modernism somehow collapsed. It became different. It lives its own life. Gradually, in the 1990s, a monument to Jabal was erected, and the fountain was rebuilt. It changes indeed. the entire ensemble, because a new huge building appeared here, which is almost the same size as the three batyrs, although it's the main urban centerpiece, and this is just an ordinary new building. Let's hope that the reconstruction will give it a new life. We will see what they will do. Sharing the optimism of experts, we're moving from architecture, which successfully fits into the creative ideas of the film directors, to structures specially created to shine in films. The ideal embodiment of this plan is the infrastructure that New Zealand inherited after filming The Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson paved the way for many movie makers to his homeland, and now dozens of high-budget films are shot annually on this small island. After the implementation of the epic nomad The Warrior, the Almaty region received a spectacular exterior platform.
Эта локация, она удобна для съемок любой
This location
картины.
is convenient for shooting any picture. A realistic one is, for example, Nomad the Warrior, and a fantasy filmed by Timur Bekmambetov.
Можно
We
одно
can
и
film
то
the
же
same building in dozens, if not hundreds of different ways.
десятками, если не сотнями разных способов.
Although to make sure the words of the eminent director are true, we had to overcome 90 kilometers, to put it mildly, not on the most even road towards the picturesque coast of the Ili River.
If you have long cherished the plans to produce a historical blockbuster, be sure to specify the schedule of the nomad city. Each new video sequence from here increases the number of followers exponentially.
Today's last impulse in this direction is the video Medina, directed by Aysultan Siitov for Kazakh-Russian musician Jahalip.
Сам женюсь скоро.
I'm getting married myself, so we decided to film such a video. It's like a love story. You can feel Kazakh steppe, spirit, and patriotism.
Патриотизм.
Well, in general, there is a lot of filming going on here. It's preferable to schedule your shoot in advance and call us, sign a contract 3 months before the actual filming, because there are so many people who want to shoot a love story, who wants to shoot some kind of video clip for themselves, for their own purposes. Also for films, some shooting is going on too. Now at the moment, we're preparing a large project with Russian filmmakers, with a Russian company specifically. The starting point for the construction of a 600-meter location was the study of the internal structure of the ancient settlement of Turkestan. Of course, everything is scaled in a concentrated form, but they tried to transfer the details of the exteriors with due care.
Мне кажется, знаешь, помимо архитектуры, здесь еще уникальный ландшафт природный. То есть
In addition to architecture, it seems to me that there is still a unique natural landscape. The gates, the entrance, they all fit very well into all this. Well, I don't know, it's more impressive to me how architecture tries to fantasize, copy the old architecture. This is a mosque or a district committee. Looks like a mosque in Bukhara or Khiva. These arcades, columns are my favorite. Yes, there is an oriental flair, very stylish. It's on the verge of Uzbekistan, southern Kazakhstan style. This is eclecticism. There is a mixture of different styles.
смешение идет стилей.
Indeed, the medieval chambers are on the left, and the skeleton of a broken Mercedes is on the right. The reason for this eclecticism is the most practical. The location allows to expand the range of reproduced epochs and geographical points. So the events of nomads in the original book by Yasin Berlin quite specifically dated to the 18th century, and the prologue to Day Watch, a fictional episode of Tamerlane's story, dated to the end of the 14th century. New plots will be sent to other time periods and imitate sometimes completely fictional places. We are already building locations that are suitable for our time. That is, if the nomads were set in the 18th century, then at the moment we can make sure that it's possible to film in our time, on our location. We have locations that resemble Afghanistan back in the 1980s. On such a small territory, all the functional areas of the medieval city are located. The market square, the workshops, religious buildings, residential quarters, gates and walls. I believe the whole concept of the medieval city is presented here. Medieval city in miniature. Moreover, they try to visually reflect the purpose of the buildings. The mosque is similar to a mosque, a palace to a palace. In addition to that, everything is reproduced with a great attention to details. Pay attention. Thatched roofs, window openings, adobe walls. The character is reflected. If you can imagine people in medieval clothes, animals in appendages, it will be even more authentic. From staffage, it would look even more fantastic. I agree. Authentic materials which correspond to the past are mostly used.
Fortunately, clay, straw, and wood do not change from century to century, although they require more detailed care in order to preserve the idea of the decorator.
However, here, the artists have their own little tricks.
Вот смотри, давай обратим внимание на керамическую
Look,
плитку.
let's pay attention to ceramic tiles. In principle, the mosaic was perfectly conveyed. It looks authentic and the pattern is reproduced perfectly. Geometrically, I agree.
There are also large doors.
The doors are simply luxurious, antique, blackened, and aged. Here we have a stone portal. No, it's not a stone, it's polystyrene. And polyurethane foam. Yes, indeed, it's polystyrene. But it doesn't look like polystyrene from afar. The genius of the decorator.
Ну, смотрится издалека, я бы тебе не сказал, что...
Гений декоратора?
However, the viewer will never notice the substitution, and correcting the pattern on a masterfully sought piece of polystyrene is several times cheaper and easier than tormenting with real stones. Perhaps, in this aspect, fake architecture goes as far as possible from the real one. But for now, we will look at the whole town from the highest point of the front structure, a little less than 17 meters. Please note that the most spectacular views are from the top. Look, we see the roofs of houses, the river, the mountains, and on both sides and at the same time we still have the steppe. From above, everything always looks beautiful, and the city organically fits into this landscape. And pay attention to the colors. We see monochrome colors at this time of year. Look, it feels like it's in its place. It perfectly fits into this place. Well, let's go up and see what's up there, at the very top of the wall. Let's take a look. Yes, here we get the most spectacular shots and views. This shows that the city consists of several different parts. The main square, Rabat, a shopping district. In principle, yes, the scenery has room to expand. The steppe is all around. The medieval city has room to grow. Just like the whole Kazakh cinema, from the city of nomads to the bends of the river against the background, on the top of the farthest hill, there are several kilometers, and the Altyn Yemel Nature Reserve alone has 520,000 hectares of incredibly beautiful landscapes. And how many cinematic buildings that we have not yet seen from the big screen. Across the country, dozens, if not hundreds of amazing objects. So many things to film. Rashid Nugmanov also cares about the future of the cinema as much as he can. In particular, he was one of the initiators of this year's specialized law to help himself and his colleagues. Although the law is not the point here. Even if there is no movie law, even if there won't be the state funds for film, I'm sure filmmakers, and there are many of them in Kazakhstan, will still shoot their films. I don't know, with the photo camera, with what they have at their disposal. I'm speaking from my own experience. Despite the fact that you might do different things, you still think about the idea in your head until you realize it sooner or later. Otherwise, you get a little restless.
Все равно об этом думаешь постоянно. Я рано или поздно осуществляешь, иначе места себе не находишь.